The wind came in off the San Pedro Valley like a living thing hot, dusty and mean enough to scrape the paint off a preacher's wagon if you parked it wrong. It funneled straight through the gaps in the clapboard walls of the old auction barn, making the hanging lanterns sway and filling the air with a constant, restless moan. Even the horses tethered outside stomped and snorted with irritation. Inside, the barn was packed shoulder to shoulder with men. Miners with soot still clinging to their hair. Cowhands smelling of sweat, saddle leather, and last night's cheap whiskey. Ranchers with hard faces carved by sun and solitude. All of them came expecting tools, horses, maybe a wagon wheel or two. None of them expected this. A woman, not just any woman, a bride for claim. She stood behind the auctioneer on the creaking wooden platform, small carpetbag at her feet. Hands folded tight against her stomach, shoulders pulled back in a taut line of dignity that was fraying by the minute. A thin white veil draped from her bonnet, hiding half her face but not her trembling breath. Clara Ridley. Her name had once carried a kind of quiet respect in this part of the territory. Folks used to speak well of her father, used to admire the neatness of their homestead and the sweetness of his only daughter. A girl known for milking cows before dawn, reading by lantern light, and laughing easily with neighbors. But that was before the fire, before the blaze that had taken her father, her home, and the unmarked innocence of her face. Now the whispers came sharp and merciless. Shame. Ain't it? Girl was pretty once. I heard the scars run all down the left side. Hurricane refused to take her? Lord help her. She's ruined, that's the truth. Clara heard every word even through the roar in her ears. The auctioneer, a barrel-stomached man named Brill, cleared his throat loudly as if that would summon bitters from thin air. Now, gentlemen, let's keep things civil. Miss Ridley's father owed 3 years back taxes on his land, Brill called, wiping sweat from his neck. Town law says debt can be settled through legitimate claim providing it's honorable, of course. A few men scoffed. One muttered, "Ain't no man here willing to marry a burned bride, honorable or not." Brill tried again. She can cook, mend, wash, tend a home. Hard worker, quiet, clean. Any man would be lucky. Clara stiffened. His desperation was worse than silence. Worse even than the pity leaking from every corner of the room. As Brill raised his gavel, she felt the last of her pride battered but alive curl inward to protect itself. All right, boys, who'll start us off? Do I hear $20? Silence. The dust swirling through the barn settled on boots and hats and shoulders, but not one man shifted, not one hand twitched toward a bidding card. Clara's heart thudded painfully. She bit the inside of her cheek hard enough to taste copper. She would not cry. Not in front of men who had already decided she was worth less than a saddle blanket. $15? 10? 5? A miner spat tobacco juice at the dirt. A cowboy scratched his jaw. A ranch hand shifted to whisper something that made the others laugh under their breath. Brill sighed, looking at Clara with helpless irritation, as though she personally was making his job difficult. Clara closed her eyes for half a heartbeat. Lord, if you still care for me at all, send someone. Anyone. Don't let me stand here like unwanted stock. The barn doors slammed open. A gust of hot Arizona air swept in along with a man whose presence changed the atmosphere the way thunder changes a calm sky. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with long black hair braided in 2 strands that hung over a chest covered in worn buckskin. His skin carried the deep bronze of the Apache people, and his face bore a long scar that ran from temple to jaw, old, white, and deadly-looking. He walked with the smooth, silent confidence of a man who had seen more than most and feared less than all. Jonas Cade. Whispers turned from petty gossip to quiet fear. That's him. The half-Apache rancher down south. Heard he killed 3 men defending his land. Best leave him be man's touched by ghosts. Jonas removed his hat and stepped inside fully. Dust swirled around his boots like it wanted to run from him. He spoke to Brill without once glancing at the crowd. Am I late? Brill stammered. Only for the last item. Everything else is gone. Jonas's eyes, dark, unreadable, sharp as a hawk, shifted to Clara. Clara felt the air leave her lungs. She had expected disgust, curiosity, pity. She saw none of it. His expression did not change at all. He studied her veil with the same quiet intensity he gave everything else. No judgment. No recoil. Just awareness. What's the debt? He asked. Brill blinked. The debt? For her? Clara's fingers dug into her skirt until her knuckles ached. Brill told him the amount. Jonas did not bargain. Did not ask questions. He simply nodded once. I'll pay it. The barn erupted with whispers. You're tacking her? Is he mad? An Apache wants a burned bride? That don't make sense. Clara's pulse hammered against her ribs. Jonas Cade. Claimed her? Without knowing anything about her? Without seeing her face? Brill, shocked but eager to end the embarrassment, shouted, Sold. The gavel cracked against the block. The sound rang through the barn like a gunshot. Clara. Ridley's fate shifted in a single breath from abandoned woman to the legally bound wife of the most feared rancher in Arizona territory. As Jonas turned toward her, she felt a strange mix of terror and something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not safety, not comfort, but the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, her life wasn't over. Jonas positioned himself a respectful distance from her. We ride in 10 minutes, he said quietly. Gather what's yours. His voice held no threat, no cruelty, just a calm steadiness that made the floor stop tilting beneath her. Clara stared at him, unsure whether to speak. Then Jonas did something that made her breath hitch. He slightly dipped his head. An unspoken courtesy, a gesture of respect. No man in that barn had offered her anything close to that. Clara picked up her carpetbag with trembling fingers. The men who had refused to bid watched. Her walk passed in stunned silence, as though unable to comprehend the simple fact that someone had looked at what they all dismissed and chosen her without even seeing her face. And outside, the wind shifted cooler now, almost gentle, as though the territory itself sensed that Clara Ridley's story had taken a turn no one expected, not even her. The sky was turning the pale gold of late afternoon by the time Jonas Cade finished settling the debt and walked Clara out of the auction yard. The sun beat down hard, casting long shadows across the dusty street. Clara kept her veil low, careful not to meet the eyes of anyone lingering outside the saloon or leaning against storefronts. Folks were staring. She could feel it like pricks against her skin, but Jonas seemed not to notice or care. He moved with heavy silence, each step measured, each motion calm, like a man used to carrying responsibility without needing words for it. His horse, a thick-muscled roan, stood tethered at the post outside the blacksmith's shop. Jonas untied the reins, checked the cinch, then turned to her. You ride? His voice was deep, rough around the edges, but steady as stone. Clara hesitated. She used to ride every day before the fire, before the weight of half-healed skin pulled tight across her cheek, before she became something people whispered about instead of greeted. Yes, she said finally. I do. Jonas nodded once, accepting the answer without question. He didn't lift her immediately. Instead, he offered his hand open, but not assuming. She placed her gloved fingers in his, expecting to feel calloused roughness or tight impatience. Instead, his grip was warm and surprisingly gentle. He boosted her up into the saddle with ease. Clara adjusted her skirt, gripping the horn tightly, while Jonas mounted behind her. His body did not press into her, but his presence was unmistakable, solid, warm, grounding. The kind of presence that made her pulse shift from fearful flutter to something steadier. "Hold steady," he said quietly. Then they rode. Clara felt every jolt of the horse's stride through her bones. But Jonas kept a firm, careful hand on the reins. They passed the edge of town, leaving behind the cracked wooden storefronts, the leaning telegraph poles, the muddy watering trough where horses nosed for coolness. With each hoof beat, the world widened around them. She glanced back once. The town shrank into a cluster of dusty roofs, judgment, and whispers fading behind her. Ahead of her stretched the open Arizona territory, wild and endless. Sagebrush, red rock, clusters of mesquite trees. The kind of land that swallowed men whole if they weren't careful. Jonas broke the silence first. "You have water?" Clara swallowed. "A small canteen in my bag." "I've got more," he said. "Enough for a day's ride, maybe more." She nodded, unsure what to reply. A part of her wanted to fill the quiet with words, but another part, larger, deeper, was afraid. Afraid of saying the wrong thing. Afraid of seeming weak. Afraid of assuming kindness when he had given her none beyond necessity. After several long minutes, she asked, "How far is your ranch?" "Close to the borderlands," Jonas said. "Half a day, maybe more the way you're sitting." Clara straightened immediately. "I can ride hard." He made a low sound, not quite a chuckle, not quite disbelief. "I know you can. But we're not rushing." A pause. "Your body's been through something," he added. She stiffened. "You don't know that." Jonas's voice stayed level. "I know pain when I see it." She looked down at the reins. Her hands trembled. After a moment she whispered, "Are you angry that you paid my debt before seeing me?" Jonas shifted behind her, not in discomfort but in thought. His hand tightened slightly on the reins. "I'm not angry," he said. "I don't buy horses blind. But I'm not marrying a horse." Clara froze, unsure if she should take offense or relief. Jonas continued, voice low but firm. "I claimed you because no one else would, and because no man should be left standing on a stage being judged like cattle." Clara's breath hitched. She had expected ownership, expectation, maybe even entitlement, but not moral outrage. Jonas guided the horse around a cluster of boulders, leading them onto a narrow path that wound between red cliffs. The shadows stretched long across the ground, sharp as blades. "Whatever you're hiding under that veil," Jonas said quietly, "it's yours to show, not mine to demand." Clara's eyes stung with unshed tears. She blinked them away fiercely. The hours passed. The sun sank slowly, bleeding orange into purple. Desert birds called overhead, flitting between the high rocks. Clara's legs ached from the saddle, but Jonas never pushed the pace too hard. He stopped once to let the horse drink and handed Clara his canteen without a word. She took it hesitantly. "Thank you." Jonas nodded. That was the most conversation they'd had since leaving town. As twilight deepened, he drew the horse to a slow halt near a small wash where cottonwoods grew tall and silver. "We'll make camp here." Clara dismounted awkwardly. Jonas steadied her with one hand on her waist, careful, respectful, as though afraid she might break. His touch sent an unexpected warmth spiraling through her. He set to work quickly gathering wood, striking flint, laying out blankets. Clara wanted to help, but she didn't know what he expected. So she asked, "What should I do?" Jonas didn't look up from arranging the fire. "What you're able." Something in the phrasing struck her. Not what he wanted, not what he demanded, but what she was able. She knelt and began sorting fallen branches into piles by size. Jonas glanced at her once, then returned silently to his task. When the fire cracked to life, Clara felt its heat lick against her veil. "Sit," Jonas said gently. She did, folding her hands in her lap. Night spread over the desert like a dark blanket stitched with stars. Coyotes howled in the distance. Somewhere far off, a lone night bird called Jonas ate quietly, handing her a portion of hard biscuit and salted jerky. They ate in silence, but the silence wasn't hostile. It wasn't even uncomfortable. It felt cautious. Two strangers on the same side of danger. After a while, Clara found her voice again. You said earlier you don't demand I show my face. Jonas didn't immediately respond. He poked at the fire with a stick, embers rising in flickers. No, most men would. He took a slow breath. Most men don't know how to look at pain without flinching. Clara's throat tightened. And you? She whispered. I've seen worse than scars, Jonas said softly. On others. On myself. She didn't know what he meant by that, but she sensed the line in his voice, the edge of a memory he wasn't ready to touch. They fell into quiet again. The fire popped. The night deepened. Clara lay down in her bedroll, the earth beneath her surprisingly cool. She pulled the blanket over her shoulders and stared at the stars. Jonas remained sitting by the fire, rifle across his knees, eyes sharp. Watching the horizon, he didn't sleep. She realized it then. Jonas wasn't just watchful. He was guarding her, not because he owned her, not because she was helpless, but because he believed she deserved safety. It shook her more deeply than anything else had that day. Staring into the darkness, Clara whispered into the stillness, too softly for Jonas to hear. Maybe I wasn't saved today. Maybe I was given a chance. As the fire's glow flickered across Jonas's steady silhouette, she wondered not for the first time why a man feared by half the territory had chosen to spare a woman the world had already discarded, and though she didn't know it yet, the answer would change everything. Morning came slow, climbing over the horizon in soft stripes of pale rose and gold. Clara woke to the sound of Jonas stirring the embers back to life, the scent of smoke mixing with cold desert air. She pulled her veil into place before sitting up. Habit had become instinct. Jonas glanced her way only briefly and nodded. We ride soon, he said. Clara folded her blanket and packed her things, feeling the soreness in her legs from the long ride. She expected him to ask if she needed help, or to question her silence, or to treat her like a burden. He did none of that. Jonas simply readied the horse, filled both canteens, and mounted up. When he reached a hand down, Clara placed her palm in his, surprised again at the steadiness of his grip. The world was easier to face when someone held your hand like it mattered. They rode for hours in peaceful quiet, following a narrow trail that wound through granite outcrops and patches of desert grass. The stark beauty of it all, the sky too big for words. The sweep of hills painted in shades of rust wrapped around Clara like a strange comfort. The Apache ranch came into view around noon. It wasn't grand. Not like the sprawling white-painted spreads owned by wealthy cattle barons near Tucson. Jonas's land was quieter, more isolated. A modest cabin stood near a line of cottonwood trees. A small barn, a corral with 2 horses grazing, a bunkhouse at a short distance away. Smoke rose from the stovepipe, curling lazily into the sky. For a man with a fearsome reputation, the simplicity of his home surprised her. Jonas dismounted first, then reached up to help her down. As her boots touched the earth, she looked around, absorbing the silence. No neighbors. No prying eyes. No one to whisper behind cupped hands. This place felt like the edge of the world. This your land? Clara asked quietly. Jonas nodded. My father built the cabin. My mother planted those. He gestured to the cottonwoods. A softness touched his expression. There and gone in a blink. Clara wanted to ask more, but sensed that his memories were guarded like the land he lived on. Jonas led the roan to the hitching post. The cabin is yours. Clara blinked. Mine? You need space, he said simply. It's warm, clean. I stay in the bunkhouse. She felt her breath catch. A man who had bought her without touching her now gave her a home and distance. Anything else would have been easier to understand. Clara followed him to the cabin, unsure what to expect. Jonas opened the door and stepped aside. Inside was a single room, simple but welcoming. A bed with a patchwork quilt, a small table, a shelf lined with jars of flour and beans, a rug that must have been woven years ago, edges fraying but colors still rich, clean windowsills, fresh water bucket filled. Someone had lived here with care. This was your parents' home? Clara asked, her voice reverent. Jonas nodded once. My father died in the army wars. My mother died earlier. His tone held no bitterness, no embellishment. Only fact. Before she could respond, he added, This place has been empty too long. Need someone who'll tend it. Someone like me? She whispered. He glanced at her, really glanced, and Clara couldn't read his expression. Beneath the quiet shadow of his face, someone who deserves peace, he said. Clara lowered her gaze, moved in a way she wasn't prepared for. She set her carpetbag beside the bed, fingers lingering on the wooden frame. Jonas stepped back. Get settled. I'll bring wood. He left before she could speak, giving her space without needing to be asked. Clara removed her bonnet and veil once she was alone. In the small mirror above the table, her reflection stared back, half the face she remembered, half changed by fire's unforgiving hand. She touched the scarred cheek lightly, not flinching at its texture. She had learned to survive this image, though not to accept it. Jonas hadn't reacted at all when he'd first seen the veil. But she wondered what he would do when the truth came out. Not if, when. Because she refused to hide forever. After washing her face and drinking water, Clara stepped outside. Jonas was stacking wood near the cabin, sleeves rolled up, muscles shifting beneath sun-worn skin. He looked like a man forged by the land he lived on, strong, solitary, unbending. Can I help? She asked. You don't have to, he replied, though he handed her 2 pieces of firewood without hesitation. Clara carried them to the porch, then straightened her back and wiped her brow. The sun was warm against her veil, but the work felt good, familiar. You worked a homestead before, Jonas observed. My father taught me, she said, smiling faintly beneath the fabric. Everything from milking cows to planting beans. Jonas studied her, not in a way that made her shrink, but in a way that reminded her of someone trying to understand the shape of a story. Your father? He treated you well? He asked. Clara nodded slowly. He was gentle. The kind of man who'd walk 6 miles just to bring home a book I wanted to read. Jonas's jaw tightened slightly at that, and he looked away as if fighting some memory. I had someone, he said quietly. Before the wars tore through our lands. Clara stilled. Jonas rarely spoke about himself. She sensed this was something he didn't offer lightly. You loved her, Clara said softly. Jonas nodded once. She was promised to me. My betrothed. What happened? He paused. The desert wind rushed between them, pushing his hair back from his face. She died when soldiers burned one of our camps, he said, voice flat, controlled too controlled. I was away scouting. Came back to ashes. Clara's throat tightened painfully. She wanted to reach out, to touch his arm, to say something comforting. But grief this deep wasn't something a hand or words could fix. I'm sorry, she whispered. Jonas didn't look at her. I learned then that fire doesn't care who it takes, or what it leaves behind. Clara's breath caught. Her scarred cheek burned, not from heat, but from understanding. Jonas didn't just see pain. He recognized it. He carried his own scars, ones that didn't show on skin. A long silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken truths. Clara took a breath that trembled at the edges. Jonas, I can't hide my face from you forever. He turned toward her, his gaze steady, patient. I'll see it when you choose to show it, he said. Not before. Clara felt something uncoil inside her chest, a tightness she'd carried since the night of the fire. Jonas wasn't asking for her beauty. He wasn't demanding her trust. He wasn't expecting anything she couldn't give. He was waiting, and in the stillness of that moment, Clara realized that Jonas Cade was not dangerous because of the legends whispered about him. He was dangerous because of the quiet loyalty burning beneath his restraint, because his kindness, wrapped in grit and silence, could undo a woman's heart faster than any tender words. Clara looked out across the land, his land, and felt, for the first time in a long while, the faint beginning of something that scared her more than the scars ever had: hope. The next morning broke cold and bright, with a wind that swept down from the hills and set the cottonwoods whispering. Clara had slept fitfully, waking several times through the night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Jonas's face as he'd spoken about his betrothed, his voice steady, but his soul shaken. She saw the grief he carried like a second skin. And each time she woke, she pressed a hand to her scarred cheek and wondered how a man could fold so much hurt into so much silence. By dawn she rose, washed, braided her hair, and stood before the mirror, veil in hand. She stared at herself for a long moment. The veiled woman belonged to fear. The unveiled woman belonged to truth, and Clara had lived afraid long enough. When she stepped outside, Jonas was already chopping wood. The sun had barely climbed over the horizon, but he worked with a quiet, steady rhythm, as though each swing was part of a life he couldn't leave behind even if he tried. His shirt sleeves were rolled, his dark hair tousled, his breath rising in small white puffs. Clara approached slowly. "Mornin'." Jonas paused mid-swing and turned. "Mornin'." His gaze flickered to her veil, then back to her eyes. "You sleep all right?" "As well as I could." She clasped her hands, feeling the weight of the moment pressing on her chest like a stone. "Jonas, I have something I need to tell you, to show you." Jonas set the axe down deliberately. Not a flinch, not a question. Just complete attention. "Whenever you're ready," he said. Clara swallowed. "Inside, please." He nodded and followed her to the cabin. Inside, the morning light poured through the windows, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. It felt too bright for what she was about to do. Too revealing. But maybe that was what she needed. Jonas stood near the door, arms loose at his sides. Not closed off, not guarded. Just there. Clara's fingers trembled as she reached up. "I've been hiding this from everyone. For a long time." "You don't owe me anything," Jonas said softly, "but I owe myself the truth." Her voice cracked. And with that, Clara lifted the veil. The air felt sharp against her skin. She kept her gaze down at first, her breath coming too fast. She waited for the sound she knew so well, sharp inhales, muffled gasps, pitying groans, or worst of all, the silence before someone recoiled. But the cabin remained still. Clara finally raised her eyes. Jonas wasn't staring in horror. He wasn't stepping back. He wasn't averting his gaze. He simply looked at her, really looked, like a man seeing a sunrise he hadn't expected. His eyes took in the burn scar that covered the right side of her face, the uneven texture, the tightened skin, the patch of hairline that had never grown back. A mark cruel enough to frighten strangers and drive suitors away, like skittish horses. Jonas's expression didn't shift with disgust. If anything, his jaw softened. After a long moment, he said quietly, "Clara, who told you this face needed hiding?" The question hit harder than any insult she'd ever endured. "My mother first," she whispered, blinking back the sting of memory. She tried to pretend it didn't bother her, but I saw the way she looked at me, like she'd failed me, like I was broken." Jonas shook his head slowly. You're not broken. Men in town said worse. Clara's voice grew tighter. They laughed. They said no man would ever want a bride who looked like something the fire spit out. Her hand moved to cover her cheek, but Jonas stepped forward and gently caught her wrist. Let me look, he murmured. Clara froze as he moved closer, close enough that she could feel the heat from his skin, close enough that his breath brushed her forehead. He studied her face with the same care she imagined he once used to break wild horses. Not fear, not pity, just patience. His fingers touched her jaw lightly, tracing the edge where untouched skin met the scarred. She tensed, expecting revulsion. Instead, Jonas whispered, "Fire took someone I loved. It left me with ghosts." He met her eyes. "But it didn't take you. It didn't take your courage. It didn't take your voice." Her breath shuddered. "You're not frightened? By scars?" Jonas breathed. "No, scars mean you survived." Clara felt something inside her crack, like a shell breaking open. Tears threatened to spill. "Most men look away," she whispered. "I'm not most men." No, he certainly wasn't. The silence stretched thick and warm. For the first time since the fire, Clara felt seen not as an injury, not as a mistake, but as a person. Jonas finally released her wrist, though the warmth of his touch lingered like a brand. But the moment wasn't finished. Jonas took a step back and reached into the inner pocket of his vest. Slowly, he pulled something out, something small, wrapped in cloth. When he unfolded it, Clara's breath caught. It was a piece of charred beadwork, colors faded but still beautiful. A single fragment from what must have once been a larger tribal design. The edges were burned. "This belonged to my betrothed," Jonas said quietly. "The only thing I found after the soldiers came." Clara's heart twisted. "Jonas, I didn't know you carried this." "I keep it to remember." His gaze sharpened, not cold, but resolute. "But I don't keep it to live in the past." He closed the cloth gently around the beads and tucked them away again. "I froze when I first saw you at the auction, Clara, but it wasn't your veil. It wasn't fear. It was remembering what fire can take." Her breath trembled. "But then I saw your eyes," he continued, "and I knew you weren't someone to pity. You were someone who fought to stand back up." Clara shook her head, tears slipping down her cheek. "I'm not that strong." "You're stronger," he said, voice dropping low. "Stronger than me." The words hollowed out her chest, leaving room for something warm to rise. Jonas stepped closer again. "Clara, may I touch your cheek?" No man had asked her that before. No man had wanted to. She nodded, barely able to speak. Jonas lifted his hand and laid his palm against her scarred cheek, not hesitantly, not gingerly, but gently, fully. His thumb brushed along the curve of the burn, as though mapping it, memorizing it. Clara closed her eyes, leaning into the touch without meaning to. Jonas's voice was nearly a whisper. "This doesn't frighten me." "You don't frighten me." When she opened her eyes, there was something different in his, something deeper, quieter, more dangerous than anything she had expected. A promise, unspoken, unrushed. Real. Clara exhaled shakily. "I don't know what happens next." Jonas let his hand fall, though slowly, as if reluctant. "Whatever happens," he said, "we'll face it as two people with pasts." He nodded toward her cheek. "Not as things to hide, but as things that made us." The weight that had anchored her heart for years seemed to lift one fragile inch. "Thank you," she whispered. He shook his head. "Don't thank me. Just live here. Be here. Let the land and the quiet heal you." He turned toward the door, pausing with his hand on the frame. "And when you're ready, we'll talk about being more than strangers." Clara pressed a trembling hand to her cheek, still warm from his touch, and let the tears fall freely. Not from shame this time, but from the first bloom of something she feared to name. Hope. The days that followed settled into a quiet rhythm, like dust drifting in a sunbeam, subtle, steady, unhurried. Jonas didn't press Clara about removing her veil again. He didn't linger near the cabin unless she invited him, and he didn't speak about the auction or the town. Instead, he worked the ranch with methodical patience, leaving Clara space to find her place in the world she now shared with him. Clara spent each morning learning the land. She swept the cabin, aired the bedding, learned the creaks of the wooden floorboards that had once belonged to Jonas's mother. She studied the way the cottonwoods rustled in the wind as if whispering secrets. She learned how the air smelled before rain and which birds perched on the fence posts at sunrise, but she also learned Jonas. He rose early, always before dawn. He cooked his own meals, quietly, as if not wanting to disturb her. He repaired fence posts along the northern border. He spoke sparingly, but when he did, his words carried weight. His presence filled the ranch not with noise, but with a steady strength, like a heartbeat in the earth. Every night, Clara found herself waiting for his footsteps as he returned to the bunkhouse. Every morning, she found herself hoping he'd come to the cabin door with that faint, unreadable expression of his half-wary, half-gentle. A strange comfort grew between them. Something rooted deep, like water in the desert. One evening, a storm rolled across the plains, thunder low and rumbling, lightning splitting the sky in ghostly veins. Clara lit the oil lamp as wind shoved against the windows, shaking the cabin. The wood groaned with every gust. When thunder cracked directly overhead, Clara flinched and pressed a hand to her scarred cheek. Fire had come with a sound like that, violent, merciless. Her breath hitched. A knock sounded on the cabin door. Before she could answer, Jonas stepped inside, rain dripping from the edges of his coat, dark hair plastered to his forehead. He scanned her face, scared, pale. Trembling, then closed the door behind him. "Storm's a bad one," he said, his voice low but steady. "Didn't want you alone." Clara nodded, unable to speak. Jonas took off his coat and hung it on the peg by the door. Lightning flashed again, and instinctively, Clara's hand flew to her cheek as she recoiled. Jonas stepped toward her, slow as sunrise. "Clara," he murmured, "you're safe here." The words wrapped around her like a quilt. "I know," she whispered. "But storms, they sound like that night." Jonas understood without needing more. He pulled out a small wooden stool and sat beside her at the table. "My people taught that storms cleanse the land," he said quietly. "They wash away what's dead so new things can grow." Clara breathed shakily. "This one feels like it's trying to tear the world apart." He gave the faintest, almost imperceptible smile. "Some things need tearing apart." She glanced at him. "Like what?" "The lies we tell ourselves," he said simply. Her throat tightened. She stared into the lamplight, watching its glow dance across the walls. "What lies do you tell yourself?" she asked softly. Jonas hesitated, a rare, fragile uncertainty flickering in his gaze. "That I can live alone without being lonely. That my betrothed's memory means I can never give my heart again." He paused. "That if I get close to someone else, I'll fail them. I'll lose them." Clara's breath caught. She hadn't known a man like Jonas could feel fear, not of bullets or war or fire, but of love. The storm raged outside, shaking the windows. Clara reached across the table and laid her hand atop his. Jonas froze. Then, slowly, his fingers curled beneath hers as if anchoring himself. "Jonas," she whispered, "you don't fail people. You save them." His brow creased. "I didn't save her." Clara tightened her grip. "You would have if you could. You would have done anything. But her death was not your doing. And mine, my scars weren't caused by anything you did or didn't do. We're not things you failed." Jonas closed his eyes for a long moment, breathing deeply, letting her words settle into the cracks inside him. When he opened them again, his gaze held something different, something newly unburdened. "Clara," he said, voice rough, "you're braver than you know." Her heart hammered. She swallowed hard. I'm only brave when you're close. Lightning flashed again, but this time she didn't flinch. Jonas rose slowly from the stool and stepped closer to her. He reached out a hand, giving her time to refuse, but she wouldn't. She couldn't. Her breath trembled as his fingers brushed her jaw. You sure you want this? He murmured. Clara nodded, eyes shining. I've never been more sure. Jonas leaned in, not claiming, not rushing, just waiting until she bridged the final inch. When their lips met, it was soft at first, tentative, almost reverent. A kiss of two wounded people learning how to hope. The storm crashed outside, but the fire inside her chest warmed every trembling part of her. Jonas deepened the kiss only when she lifted her hands to his shoulders, rising onto her toes. His arms wrapped around her waist, steady and warm, grounding her. Her scarred cheek brushed his rough jaw, but he didn't pull away. If anything, he held her closer. When they finally parted, Clara rested her forehead against his chest, hearing the steady thrum of his heartbeat. I'm not afraid of storms anymore, she whispered. Jonas's hand threaded gently through her hair. You've got a heart stronger than fire, Clara. She smiled softly, warmth flooding her. And you? You're not the dangerous man they say you are. He chuckled, a low, rare sound. Oh, I'm dangerous. He lifted her chin, meeting her gaze. Just not to you. Clara's breath caught as warmth spread through her like sunrise breaking through clouds. Jonas hesitated, then said quietly, I froze when I saw you because it felt like the past was reaching for me. But I'm done living in ghosts, and if you'll have me, if you want me, I'd like to build something real here. With you. Her heart felt too big for her chest. I want that. More than anything? Outside, the storm began to quiet. The thunder rolling away into the hills. Jonas pressed a soft kiss to her forehead, then held her close, slow and sure. Clara closed her eyes, breathing him in smoke, rain, leather, the warm scent of home. For the first time since the fire, she wasn't hiding. For the first time since Jonas lost his betrothed, he wasn't alone. And for the first time in both their lives, the future felt like something they could choose instead of something that happened to them. The storm outside had tried to tear the world apart. Inside the cabin, two hearts began to build a new one, together.